The Panama Canal, one of the most crucial waterways on the planet, has been fundamental in shaping global trade since its inauguration. The possibility of the United States regaining control of this strategic passage has generated discussions and raised significant questions about the future of geopolitics and international trade. Recently, speculation suggested that a memorandum might have instructed the Pentagon to outline plans for such an eventuality, which, given the canal's importance to the U.S. economy and national security, deserves an in-depth analysis. The centrality of the Panama Canal in global maritime trade is undeniable, as it connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, dramatically reducing transit times and costs for thousands of vessels annually. It is estimated that about 5% to 6% of global maritime trade passes through its locks, demonstrating its vital role in global supply chains. The recurrence of terms such as crucial and vital in various sources to describe the canal's role underscores its enduring importance in the geopolitical landscape, making any potential change in control a matter of international concern. The connection established by political figures between the strategic importance of the canal and the economic well-being and national security of the U.S. suggests a potential motivation for intervention, rooted in concerns about perceived threats to these interests. What would be the likely strategic, diplomatic, and economic consequences of the United States retaking the Panama Canal in the current geopolitical context, especially considering China's growing influence in the region? However, the mere mention of a possible takeover by the U.S., even if based on a hypothetical memorandum, immediately raises questions about international law, Panamanian sovereignty, and the potential for conflict considering the peaceful transfer of administration in 1999. President-elect Donald Trump recently initiated a debate on the ownership of the canal, threatening to reclaim it and stating that Panama Canal tariffs were too high and that the U.S. was being cheated. The history of the Panama Canal is intrinsically linked to the United States, which led its construction, completed in 1914, recognizing early on its strategic value for trade and defense. However, after years of negotiations, the Torrijos-Carter Treaty, signed in 1977 by then U.S. President Jimmy Carter and Panamanian leader Omar Torrijos established a timeline for the gradual transfer of canal administration to Panama, culminating in its full sovereignty in 1999. This act represented a milestone in U.S.-Latin American relations at the time. The economic importance of the canal is vast, with more than 14,000 ships transiting annually, carrying goods ranging from consumer electronics and automobiles to crude oil and agricultural products. This waterway not only shortens shipping routes, saving time and fuel costs, but also generates significant revenue for Panama, estimated at more than $3 billion annually in toll fees. Parallel to this dynamic, there has been an increase in China's economic and potentially strategic presence in the region, particularly through investments in infrastructure near the canal and the operation of ports by a Hong Kong company with links to Beijing. This growing Chinese involvement has been a cause for concern for the United States, with the U.S. Southern Command expressing discomfort regarding these projects. The fact that the U.S. initially built and controlled the canal, followed by a negotiated handover, creates a complex context. A takeover by the U.S. would not only violate current international agreements, but could also be seen as a reversal of a previously established commitment to Panamanian sovereignty. Economic data consistently points to the vital role of the canal in facilitating trade for major global players, including the US and China. This interdependence suggests that any disruption in the canal's operation, including a forced takeover, could have significant and widespread economic consequences. China's growing influence in Panama, particularly in proximity to the canal, is presented as a fundamental concern for the US. This suggests that a potential underlying motivation for a US takeover could be to counter China's growing strategic presence in a region historically considered to be within the U.S. sphere of influence. Panama's president, José Raúl Mulino, rejected Trump's threats and allegations, stating that the canal is not under the direct or indirect control or influence of any other country. Although the idea of a strategic memorandum is hypothetical, it is possible to outline potential U.S. objectives should they consider military action to regain control of the Panama Canal. These objectives could include ensuring uninterrupted access to the canal, neutralizing perceived threats from China, and reaffirming U.S. influence in the region. Regarding military guidelines, three main axes could be considered. First, a reinforcement of the military presence in Latin America through the increase of troops, the intensification of naval exercises, and intelligence gathering operations, possibly justified by the need to monitor Chinese activities and ensure regional stability. Second, the application of military control strategies, which could involve the use of doctrines such as the Powell Doctrine, which emphasizes the use of overwhelming force and clear objectives, as well as the use of rapid reaction forces and special operations to quickly secure key infrastructure and neutralize any resistance from Panamanian military forces or other actors. Third, consideration of the diplomatic and economic impact, analyzing the likely reactions of international organizations such as the UN, including potential condemnatory resolutions, the responses of US allies who might hesitate to support a unilateral military intervention, and the possibility of economic sanctions imposed by other nations, as well as potential disruptions to international trade flows. The mention of the Powell Doctrine suggests a US approach that would prioritize quick and decisive military action to minimize casualties and achieve objectives rapidly, reflecting lessons learned from past interventions. The possibility of diplomatic isolation and economic sanctions highlights the significant risks associated with a unilateral US military intervention. Even if immediate military objectives are achieved, the need to monitor Chinese influence suggests that US military planning could be driven by a broader geopolitical competition than just concerns about the canal's operation itself. A historical parallel frequently evoked in discussions about a possible US intervention in Panama is Operation Just Cause, the 1989 American military invasion. This operation had as its stated objectives the capture of then Panamanian leader Manuel Noriega, the protection of American lives, the restoration of democracy, and ensuring the integrity of the Panama Canal Treaties. When comparing the motives for the 1989 invasion with the current strategic context, some similarities are observed, such as the claim of protecting US interests in Panama. However, there are crucial differences. In 1989, the US benefited from a certain level of internal political support in Panama for its intervention against Noriega. In the current scenario, there is no indication of such internal support for US military action, which would make any intervention a clear violation of Panamanian sovereignty in the eyes of the international community. The lack of internal political justification in Panama for a hypothetical intervention significantly increases the risk of it being perceived as an act of aggression and a violation of international law, potentially leading to stronger international condemnation compared to 1989. Although both scenarios involve US military action in Panama, the underlying strategic context has changed significantly. The rise of China as a major global power adds a new dimension to the current hypothetical situation that was not present in 1989. The possible consequences of US military action to reclaim the Panama Canal would be vast and complex. The Panamanian government, led by President Jose Raul Mulino, would likely react with strong condemnation and turn to international organizations such as the UN, where it could seek support for resolutions condemning US action and demanding the withdrawal of its forces, reaffirming Panama's sovereignty over the canal. The UN in turn could issue such resolutions, although their effectiveness would depend on the support of Security Council members. US allies might have diverse reactions, divided between supporting their American partners and their own economic and strategic relationships, particularly with China. One of the most likely consequences would be commercial retaliation by China. Given its significant volume of trade passing through the Panama Canal, China could implement trade barriers, investment restrictions, or other economic measures in response to US action. Additionally, the Panamanian population could offer internal resistance to US military occupation, which could range from peaceful protests to more organized forms of opposition, complicating the military operation and potentially leading to prolonged instability in the country. The firm position of the Panamanian president, expressed in recent statements, suggests that any US attempt to reclaim the canal would face strong opposition, both diplomatically and potentially by other means. China's heavy dependence on the Panama Canal for trade makes commercial retaliation a highly likely consequence of a US takeover, potentially leading to a broader trade dispute with global ramifications. Internal resistance in Panama, even if not militarily significant, could destabilize the country and create a prolonged security challenge for the US, potentially undermining the very stability that the US might claim to be seeking. In conclusion, the Panama Canal remains a strategic and economic asset of undeniable global importance. The possibility of the United States considering action to regain its control raises a series of complex questions with significant implications for the international order. While there may be perceived short-term benefits for the US in terms of reaffirming control over a vital waterway and containing Chinese influence, the long-term risks appear considerable. These risks include international condemnation, potential economic repercussions, regional instability, and damage to the US. His reputation as a defender of national sovereignty. The final question that arises is whether such action would be justified given the norms of international law and the principles of diplomacy, or whether it would represent a setback in international relations. The Panama Canal continues to play a crucial role in the global landscape, and any change in its status would have far-reaching consequences for trade, geopolitics, and global stability. The potential benefits for the US in reclaiming the canal seem to be primarily related to geopolitical competition with China, while the risks involve significant damage to international relations and potential economic instability, suggesting a high-risk gamble with potentially limited long-term gains. The conclusive question encourages reflection on the broader implications for international diplomacy and the rules-based international order should a powerful nation unilaterally decide to violate another country's sovereignty to achieve its strategic objectives. The act of forcibly reclaiming the canal would create a dangerous precedent, potentially undermining the principles of international law and encouraging other powerful nations to disregard the sovereignty of weaker states, leading to a more unstable and conflict-prone global environment. What do you think of this analysis of the Panama Canal situation? This geopolitical dispute between the US and China could redefine the balance of power in the Americas in the coming years. If you like this analysis, don't forget to like this video, leave your comment on which consequences you think are most likely, and subscribe to the channel for more content on geopolitics, international relations, and strategic analysis. Also activate the notification bell so you don't miss any updates on this and other important topics on the international scene. Thank you very much for watching.